Hi guys, it's Geekonomics here, and today I'm continuing the literacy playlist which I've been creating, where we are looking at this particular book by Mr. Joseph Stiglitz. And you may recall from previous installments that it takes quite some time to get through a book like this, because you do need to draw upon all of your knowledge of economics. You need to draw upon all of your micro, all of your macro, and you need to be able to in effect paste it all together in order to make sense of this excellent book. Excellent, but it will take you some time to get through it. So finally we have got through to the end of chapter 1, ladies and gentlemen. Just reached the end of chapter 1 in the last few days. So I just wanted to bring you a little update with regard to what Mr. Stiglitz is talking about when he gets to the end of chapter 1. Many of you, and certainly those of you who are my economists and you're all applying to study economics at university, which is absolutely tip-top, one of the theories that you will probably encounter at university is something called the theory of second best. Now that's something which is not really considered in the A-level syllabus, but for those of you going on to higher level study, it's certainly something that you will encounter, and it's something which Mr. Stiglitz mentions at the end of this particular chapter. So the theory of second best. So what is this theory of second best? Well, it's a situation in which there are certain distortions in the market, and in order to make the market more perfect, the government intervenes to try and put a fix in place, but actually through their interventions they make the situation worse rather than better. And a very famous economist called James Mead came up with this theory of second best. I'll not say too much more about it, simply because it's not really a primary focus for your exams or anything on your syllabus, but certainly something worth investigating and looking into further if you're interested. And then in the final section of the book, let's remember Joseph Stiglitz is considering what should be done with this Eurozone project. In the final section of the book, Joseph Stiglitz refers to the fact that during very difficult times of recession and negative growth in the likes of Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, Spain, all of these economies which are using the euro, capital markets, financial markets, what happens in those capital markets is that we see finance flowing out of those economies. You'll probably have heard of the term capital flight before, whereby investors primarily, they see the dangers in a contracting economy, because obviously they are seeking a return on behalf of their clients, and so as a consequence they pull all of their money out of the country, and that is known as capital flight. Well, what Joseph Stiglitz says, that if capital markets were actually perfect, then the opposite would be the case, and investors would see the opportunities available in a contracting economy to get in where the markets are very low, hopefully to help regenerate and rebuild the economies, and then when the economies are once again growing and potentially booming and going through the good times again, let the good times roll, then they could obviously get out, they would get in low and then get out high, and they would make their margin and their return on the difference between their get-in price and their get-out price. Now actually what does happen is quite the reverse, and so capital flows out of these economies, therefore they struggle to, for example, individuals and firms would struggle to find finance to expand and so on and so forth, and as a consequence these economies which are in recession, they actually struggle to grow during the times of recession, precisely because the capital flies out. And so Joseph Stiglitz says, quote unquote, he says that if capital markets were perfect during a recession, money would flow into the country seeking higher returns, and this would help these economies and help to offset the business cycle. You'll remember what the business cycle is, I'm sure, the economy going through the boom, recession, recovery and so on. However, Joseph Stiglitz says that this does not happen, and as a consequence the flows are actually pro-cyclical. In other words, because the capital's flowing out during times of recession, this helps to deepen the size and maybe duration of recession rather than to shorten it and reduce and narrow the gap of the recession. And indeed, those of you in my sixth form who've also read this book as well, this is another one I'd recommend to you all. This is by Sir Mervyn King. Now, Sir Mervyn King, of course, was the former governor of the Bank of England, and he also mentioned this in his book. I would have to have a little flick through to find it, but he mentions the fact that capital tends to flow uphill, and what he means by that is exactly what Joseph Stiglitz is saying, is that economies, particularly poor economies or economies which are contracting, find that capital flows out to the wealthy nations rather than capital flowing from the wealthy to the poor nations. So there's another good book for you, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to have a look. And this, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, these are totally independent reviews. I'm not on any sort of commission from Mr. J. Stiglitz or Mr. M. King, by the way. So I'm going to leave it at that, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll come back in a while with some further information and some further thoughts on Chapter 2. So bye for now.